whether or not it was a Ukrainian missile, it was only launched because of Russia. I mean, it was launched in defense, whereas I don't think Russia's defense of oopsie, one of our missiles went off track while we were trying to commit genocide and knock down the power grid and kill more Ukrainians. I don't think that's a good excuse at all. So I feel like there should be consequences. And I'm not saying retaliation, but they're definitely, between firing off these 90 missiles during G20, like you said, and this event, I think it has to have consequences. And I feel like I'm pretty confident that it will, especially I think the Ramstein's coming up too. So all this hopefully will culminate into ATACMS, increased air defense. I like Gunny's idea of, a buffer zone for Poland. And another thing, it did get brought up here, but a lot of times how is NATO going to react? How is the West going to react? And people are forgetting, what about Poland? How is Poland going to react? Because they're going to drive a lot of this reaction. And they're a great ally to Ukraine. So I think the way they're going to steer it is going to be instrumental also. So just see what y'all thought about that.
Finance?
On Poland, it's a wait and see, but clearly Poland is unimpressed, politely put, with the actions today, and we are. Russia may have effed around one too many times, and we're going to see how Poland decides they should find out. I've heard in the news reporting suggestions on exactly what Gunny suggested, which would be extending the air envelope from Poland all the way over Lviv. That sounds like an excellent start to things. Clearly, I would personally, as stated just a moment ago, prefer a maximal position. So I'm up for anything outside of shooting a nuke right at Russia, as far as what Poland wants to do. But certainly, President Duda of Poland has gotten on the phone, and they are calling the Article 4 meeting. So we're about to find out what Poland has in store and how they're going to act. And I don't think nothing is on the table here. Some sort of response would be expected. They don't have a sense of humor for it, and this is not a German prime minister who shall remain heavily named on this space. These are gentlemen who are not in Putin's pocket, who 100% have no sense of humor for this kind of BS and do not like their citizens being killed by Russian cruise missiles. So, yeah, I agree with you. What Poland does absolutely matters. But yeah, we're going to have to find out. I hope it is a appropriately sizable response. I love ATACMS for Ukraine. I love the extension of the air envelope. What Kaliningrad doing? It would be interesting to see if Lithuania just says, sorry, no more real to Kaliningrad, period, end of story. You just shot at our buddy, our neighbor here. All sorts of possibilities. We will see.
Right. Yeah, I hope we're right. I had one more quick thing, if you don't mind. I kind of feel like Biden's supposed slip up the other day where he said that we supplied Ukraine with a 160-mile range, but we didn't give them the 600-mile range. I don't know if that was a slip up. I kind of feel like that was maybe kind of a test in the waters and see what the reaction was. And I don't think there was much of a reaction. So that kind of gave me hope too that ATACMS above board and out in the open is going to be something that's coming. So anyway, just my own personal thought.
Yeah, I agree. That seems totally plausible. I'm going to kick it to Daryl because he's got the hands.
Go ahead, Armin.
All right. Hey there. Thank you. Hi, Finance. I had a question for the panel in general. And yeah, I agree with the previous speaker about the delivery of the weapons that might be now kicking off, hopefully, finally. And so I was wondering what Gunny said before about those 2 missiles that entered Poland today, potentially. So if there was, let's say, a KH-101 that Russian fired and the Ukrainian S-300 missile that took it down, and so it was a successful takedown, and both missiles landed in Poland. Would the warhead of the cruise missile still be able to explode with, or how did the fuse work for that warhead? I guess that's the question I had.
Yeah, so so the thing is, it's nighttime. So I've had one look at the crater. So a KH-101, let's say about 1 ton, give or take. So if you have one ton explosion, now obviously I don't know what the ground was at this farm facility. Was it concrete hard standing? We all know, you know, a lot of farms have concrete hard standing for tractors, trailers, heavy goods vehicles loading grain, because apparently this is a grain storage area. So obviously that has some kind of impact. Maybe it hit ground that's soft after a lot of rain. I'm not a physicist, so I can't tell you how deep a weapon system would go into soft, boggy ground before detonating. If it was a KH-101 with a semi-armor piercing warhead designed for killing carriers, or indeed what the impact crater of an S-300 looks like. S-300's got the warhead tends to vary in size, but say about 300 pounds. But the all-up weight of an S-300 is about 4,000 pounds in total. If you imagine that in a terminal dive, what kind of a crater would that make? Are there bits of another missile lying around in the countryside nearby? Obviously, they're going to have to wait till daylight. If there's broken up bits of a KH-101 lying around somewhere, maybe that explains it. So, I mean, could the warhead still function if it's something like a KH-101 had a mid-air breakup proximity fuse? Yeah, I would imagine so. If it's a mechanical fuse, but I don't know. You need someone like Colby or someone in to say whether that's a backup fusing on a warhead for something like a KH-101 or a Caliber. I don't know if they have a mechanical backup to the radar proximity or the impact fuse. So you know, really difficult to tell. It's really difficult to tell. I see there is a FADR radar installation 40 kilometers away from here. So it's inexplicable to me that we didn't see what was going on in terms of the air defense picture. Therefore, this round came across the border, and a few seconds later, and it would have been a few seconds, you know, there would have been no warning time. The even with the radar systems that I use, you can tell if it's going to come across the border. You look at it, you've got your track on it, it gives you course and speed and height, whether it's descending, ascending, etc., etc. So this weapon system would have been tracked, and for some reason we don't know yet, it was not engaged by us. So that would say to me there was an engagement possibly already in process, or it was a slant engagement, so there was something else in the air and a weapon system was launched, had a punt at it, missed for some reason, something went wrong or hit it, and then bits started flying everywhere. So that's another possibility. The other option is a little bit unpalatable, that NATO's latest air defense system simply didn't see a weapon system flying low level, and it flew into Poland and detonated. I struggle to believe that, to be honest with you, especially since we knew that there was a mass raid in progress. And when a mass raid is in progress, everyone perks up, lots of systems get switched on, and NATO takes a real interest right across the board from Constanta all the way up through to bordering Kaliningrad. So, you know, it's supposition, a little bit of wild ass guessing. There's not a lot of evidence to go on. There are a lot of people who should know better, absolutely screaming that this is an Article 5 and we need to start hitting Russian targets. I think that's irresponsible. I think there will probably be a time and a place for that. But if we're going to do it, we need to do it properly, and we need to do it for the right reasons, and not simply because the Twitterati are convinced that the Russians are deliberately starting to hit NATO targets. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. They're stupid enough to do it. But let's just see what the forensic evidence is. And as I say, if this was a Ukrainian V-55 model that landed in Poland, you know, a lot of people are going to look pretty bloody stupid over the next few hours, aren't they? So, you know, just everyone, you know, walk back, Jack, stay here, to use a naval term, and let's just see what actually happened tomorrow, and then, you know, by then we can kind of spitball a little bit, and if it's deliberate, NATO are going to react. They're going to have to with an ADZ or something like that. If it wasn't, and it was a tragic accident, well, we're back to square one. Yeah, I take on Lunchtime's point that if the Russians weren't launching cruise missiles at civilian targets, this wouldn't happen. But I would also say that's not a reason for us to sink the Black Sea Fleet quite yet. You know, we just need to calm down a bit.
Thank you, Gandhi. I appreciate everything you said, and especially the point that it could have just been the missile body that made that crater. That was probably a good explanation. I gotta drop out. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Herm. All right, I am just guessing here. Luca, we haven't heard from you from a while, so we're going to go to Luca and then Lunchtime. Luca.
Thank you, Finance. I mostly had a question, but maybe also a comment later. Let's start from the question. I saw some reports, I don't know if you guys have seen it, about how potentially relatively close to the area of impact there was an important power distribution grid on the Polish, so EU border, for power going into Ukraine. Seems to be a couple of credible sources saying that. Have you guys seen it? Do you have comments? Is that credible?
For some reason, my phone broke up. I think it's local connection. So I heard, is it credible? And I have no idea what you asked.
Oh, shoot. Okay, I'll say it again. Maybe it's my phone. There was some reports about looking at the map, how there was major power distribution node on the side of the border, on the Polish side of the border, that is responsible for sending power or exchanging power between Ukraine and the EU. In which case, that would point out to like a targeted strike, like they've been doing to degrade the infrastructure. But in this case, inside the EU, Polish NATO country, it seems to me like the source is credible, but I don't know. Have you guys seen it? Do you have any comments about it?
I had heard that there was power distribution in play there. It seems Troy wants to speak to this issue, so I'm going to kick to him.
Yeah, Finance, I sent you the DM. Let's say about 8 hours ago when it kicked off, the Domin had a thread going and everyone was just kind of trying to OSINT it in real time. and they found a thermal power plant and a key transmission line that was basically the link from Ukraine to Poland, and essentially Ukraine to the EU. Not the only one, but one, and it was a thermal power plant just on the other side of the border. So the theory was that it overshot, aiming for the winter, the important critical infrastructure that they have been in this attack and the previous attack last month, the large ones, and pretty much every attack this fall. That was the theory, that it could have possibly overshot by. I think it wasn't that. I have to go look. It's in the map. It's like 30 kilometers max. And that was the prevailing theory, but that was very early. So yeah, it was given real credence. I didn't hear it disputed too much, but it's one of many possibilities.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess my comment doesn't really matter. We have much smarter people in here. I think it's up to Poland to decide how much do they want to stand up to this. Poland first. It's their citizens that died. I've always been of the opinion that like there should have been some sort of like a NATO air cover since the very beginning of the war. What's Russia gonna do? Really, nothing. I remind everybody that few years back, like military airplane was flying over Turkey, and the Turks didn't like what they were doing, and they just shut it down. And then Russia bitched them on about it, and that was it. So I think that if we do not create at least a buffer zone right now, by we mean NATO, we're just going to look stupid. And also, I want to remind what President Biden said, every inch of NATO territory. So if it does turn out that this was, in fact, shot by the Russians, it seems to me this is the minimum that we should do at this point. But of course, it's up to Poland to decide. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm definitely down for that message. No arguments from this party. Back to lunchtime. And lunchtime, I was very late today. I would like to note I did, in fact, eat lunch, though I was eating it with a complete what the F expression on my face, because that's around when I was up very late last night, actually on Space and doing some other stuff in real life. And so I got the news around lunchtime that Russia had, that possibly Russia, sorry, Gunny, had apparently hit Poland with a cruise missile, adding to the fact that they had also launched 100 cruise missiles at Ukraine, something that we should not skip here on the Space. I was talking to a Ukrainian friend from a basement in Kyiv today because, of course, there was a massive 3-hour plus long air raid alert, and the only safe place to be was the basement. So everyone was in basements, and it's not particularly fun. And yeah, just wanted to point that out, that we shouldn't let the fact that Russia continues their terror, their reign of terror. They're not winning on the battlefield, but they are continuing their horrific actions. So with that, we'll go to lunchtime.
Hey, before we go to lunchtime, I just want to say, everyone, we're getting ready to do a change over here. For those that are just new to the space, please, we ask everybody to retweet the space. And then earlier today we had one of the Avstal defenders on here. That interview will be on Spotify very shortly. So I just want to remind everyone of that. And I think people will really be touched by it. It was really a really good interview for Elaine. She did the translating on it, and I think it was one of the highlights of the day, having him here, and then everybody just falling in afterwards. We've had a really good day today with people coming in and talking with us. So I just want to remind everyone of that. If you missed it, please go to the Spotify account on MriyaReport.org. We really would appreciate everybody going there, checking us out, seeing what it's about. And I just want to say good evening. All right. Finance, back to you.
Thank you very much, Daryl. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for co-hosting so much today. A much better day for you as a co-host, as a possible co-host than me. Clearly, the action today has nothing to do with sanctions or economics. It's a major military day for, sadly, not for better today. It's all not particularly hot news, except what's going on with the little island that Ukraine is busy pressuring as the Ukrainian armed forces continue to move forward. So yeah, I would like to say thank you very much to Daryl as we have a co-host switch. I believe I'm also switching out. With that, we will go back to our hand lunchtime. And thank you very much. I actually ate lunch for a change today, lunchtime.
Well, Finance, you have no idea how happy that makes me. Finally, my message is getting through that people should eat lunch. People often skip it. And bear in mind, everyone, that any time is lunchtime. It's entirely up to you what you have for lunch and when you have it. I just wanted to, because it's quite late here, so I'm going to crash. But I just wanted to say that, thank you for reminding us that to think of the fact that there were so many missiles today in Ukraine, and it was a day of outrage, really, because in typical fashion, we had Lavrov at the G20 speaking out of one side of his mouth, talking about this so-called hybrid war that the West was waging against Russia, and how all they wanted was peace, but the Ukrainians were so terribly unreasonable and they just couldn't do it. This is the frankly bollocks that he was spouting, while at the same time, or shortly afterwards, Ukraine was being shelled again. Thankfully, from all accounts, it was something like 70% of them didn't get through, or maybe it was slightly more than that. My maths is my mental arithmetic is letting me down. But the point is, it was a day of atrocities by Russia again, with them saying something different in public. So that's why, I mean, I'm not suggesting, Gunny, by any means that we start blowing up the fleet in the Black Sea Fleet, but I do think it really, this sort of idea that we have to have a Hercule Poirot-like investigation to find out exactly the details of which direction this missile came from, and whether it actually was Russian, whether it was made in Russia, whether it was launched by a Russian, whether or not he'd drunk vodka. I mean, who cares? It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. What we need is a pretext, some reason to amp up the defense of Ukraine, and we needed to do this years ago. Well, not years ago. Actually years ago. We needed to do this a long time ago to stop the loss of life and to stop the sort of thing we saw today. And we still urgently need to do it. So, regardless of what happened, we should go with your suggestion of extending that envelope, extending that defensive protection. So yeah, I just wanted to reinforce that point and say thank you so much for the space, everyone, and thank you to the host particularly as well. I'll say good night. I'll drop down to listener. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Lunchtime. All right, Gunny, your hand is raised.
Yeah, no, it's not immaterial. I don't think it is, to be honest with you. You can't use, for instance, a Ukrainian surface-to-air missile landing on Poland and killing 2 people as a pretext for some massive response by NATO. You just can't do it. It plays right into the Russian hands, doesn't it? Ukraine, who are on our side, lose control of a missile, and we blame Russia and take action against Russia. It's not good optics for us. So of course we need a forensic examination of what happened. That's what you do in life. Otherwise, we'd all be kicking 10 barrels out of each other because some bloke looked at our wife at the bar, wouldn't we? You don't just take action off the cuff using gut feeling, because these are very, very high stakes. Yeah, I get it. People think that the Russian military is a paper tiger and that they've shot their bolt here. Absolutely. But they are still in a bit of a standoff with NATO, and the stakes are too high for us to take very substantial action without fully understanding what happened last night. Look, if it turns out the Russians deliberately went after a target in Poland, that is an Article 4, that is a push the ADZ out, and there should be some kind of response at the very least. Russia being served notice that any further attacks will result in military retaliation. All right. I say that as someone who did 24 years in the military, and I understand that there is a time and a place for military action, and sometimes you will have to do nasty things in order to forestall an even bigger conflict in the future. But it goes back to the Twitterati are out here saying, right, that's it, something must be done. And I just think that there's going to be a lot of tweets being removed if the full story comes out and it's not quite what we think. They're crap, right? We know that they're crap. This may simply be bad targeting. It may be a round that has suffered an in-flight failure that they couldn't command detonate. It might be an air intercept. It could be 101 things. You sit down, you process the information, you get the facts, and then you tailor your response according to facts, not gut feeling, not outrage, not fury, not any of those things. Get the facts, then respond to it. Then we'll see. NATO will do that. Chances are they probably already have the full story. If there was an engagement going on, an AAW engagement going on, we already know what happened. But it's going to be a case of processing the information, tailoring the response, and then releasing it to the Western media, and then we'll see what happened. But I just really caution overreaction. Started beating the war drum until you know what this was. There's all sorts of bizarre possibilities. Maybe it's an aircraft. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Maybe an aircraft's been killed and that went down. The scene from the ground is a little bit confusing. The fact that the FADR installation, the NATO long-range air search facility, was 40 kilometers away, and yet we didn't engage, that's a little bit confusing. The impact crater, all sorts of things are confusing. And over the past 8 or 9 months, I've seen a lot of tweets getting deleted by people who jump on a bandwagon and then 24 hours later look a bit stupid. So, that's all I'd say. Let's just wait out, and then we'll know what the NATO response is going to be.
I think that is perfectly reasonable. And yeah, let's go to Margot, who just hopped up here for the first time, and then Troy, and our good friend Craig, haven't seen him in a bit, is coming up to join us as well. Margot, your hand is raised, ma'am. Margot, the bottom left of your thing is the mic. To turn it on to come speak to us, and we would be happy to have you. All right, we may have lost Margot. Margot going once. Margot going twice. Margot, please come back. When you hear us, Margot, we lost you. All right. Craig, you just got up here. Probably want to say something to thing. So Craig, you can hop the queue. Sorry, Troy. I've already heard from you. Craig just got here. So Craig, then Troy.
No, that's okay. I mean, I all I was going to say, obviously in reference to the topic, is I think it's important to recognize that we went into these eyes wide open, right? What the polls were doing, and what we were doing collectively was not without risk of something like this happening, whether it be an accident, an intercepted missile.
Hello?
And it's important that we hold ourselves accountable to keeping our eyes wide open and being honest with ourselves and saying, yeah, something like this may happen if we do something like this. And it's important to remember the promise you made to yourself when this war started, to support it all the way. And I think that to hedge your bets or to go sideways because of this is simply silly, to be quite honest. And it's a betrayal of that original agreement you made, not only to Ukraine, but to yourselves, to see this through.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry, Margot. All right. Margot,
sorry,
I will let you go because you were trying to be up earlier. Yeah, we have all sorts of tech issues. It happens. All right, Margot.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Come on down.
I'm a Polish. Sorry, I didn't follow your conversation earlier. I've just jumped in. I'm a Polish living in Brussels, and I'm very close to the Brussels bubble, so to speak. About the policies, also about the defense policies, about Earth organization, Copernicus and Galileo, blah blah blah, whatever. With this incident that happened just a couple of hours ago, what really make me uncomfortable is that the Polish government and Polish president acted too late, massively too late. Being a member of NATO, I'm just wondering why in the previous months there was so much focused on the Belarusian border with like a few families trying to cross and building fences that, well, of course, blocked the movement of people, but also jeopardized the safety of animals, whatever. At the same time, these forces were absolutely blind at the border with the Ukraine, where the war was happening. A few months ago, precisely speaking, in end of June. Yes.
Can you land this plane? So get to a question or an end of comment somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I will be very brief. So back in June, when I came to close to the Ukrainian border, just to pick up my adopted dog, I heard from the people living close to the border that they heard and they felt in like a ground shaking the results of the bombing near the Lviv. So I was just wondering why the Polish forces were not especially sensitive on the Ukrainian border, and it take them so many hours to react on the incident that happened today. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Margot. So yeah, a feeling from Poland to summarize that is that Poland should have acted sooner. Interesting approach. I definitely think there's people here who would agree with you. Certainly people here who wish that all of our of various countries, U.S., European, etc., who wish their countries were doing more and sooner. So don't think you were too out of the mark for that. I know Craig wants to respond, and then Troy, and then Daniel Arfire. Craig.
Troy, I promise to make this brief for you, brother. And after that, the floor is yours. I promise. I just want to contextualize this for folks. In December 10th, 1941, Germany declared war on the United States, or thereabouts, right? It was only until 1943, okay, that's 1943, that the United States was actually able to launch an offensive operation in Northern Africa. And you say, Craig, what the heck are you talking about? You're talking about invade North Africa, Operation Torch. What does this all mean? It boils down to this: time and space, right? So the United States, after war being declared, they didn't all just run to the ships and just start invading, right? You had to build up a force, you had to exercise, you had to plan, you had to integrate, you had to prepare goods, food, uniforms, bullets, bombs, everything in between, right? That took a year to do. This war started February 24th of this year. Since then, Ukraine has been able to not only defend itself, but conduct sophisticated counteroffensive operations with westernized equipment in the span of February, geez, where are we? Was this 8 months, right? So well within inside what the United States did during World War II. So we need to understand what it means to have time, right? We have to quantify that, and then we have to contextualize it against something else that might mean its equivalent. That's a direct change of direction geopolitically, let's say a war, right? So I would just say that logistical bottlenecks are real. Quality control and logistics are real. Those are not things that people just like to say to sound smart. I promise you that that is a real thing.
Craig, I don't
Yeah,
think anybody
that's
in
it.
Russia seems to agree with you.
Well, that's their war to lose and ours to win, I guess.
That seems to be how this is going, right? Like, isn't that like their problem?
Yeah. I mean, I would much rather be on the Ukrainian side, and I think that speaks of what the United States and European allies have done. This war was not. No matter what we did, we could have driven to the border and dumped everything on the border in one day. You're still not going to achieve the results of an overnight war, especially with a country, let's be honest, that has a population size like Russia and ammunition stockpiles from the Cold War to burn through. Clearly, there are things there, but also, if we're being intellectually honest and objective about it, Ukraine is kicking the crap out of them, which would signify that the Western allies and a broader sense, actually, it's 58 nations at this point. So to say the West is actually not fair. It's a much broader coalition that stretches well beyond Europe. So yeah, anyway, send it to Troy because I've spoken enough.
All right, Troy, Craig has spoken enough.
Oh, come on, please. Nobody should ever rush on my account. Well, maybe some people, but not Craig. Yeah, I was gonna agree. I didn't hear, unfortunately, I got the bug, so I didn't hear any of Margot's comments, but they sound well addressed. I was gonna say, and I also couldn't hear lunchtime, but I did hear Gunny, and I agree with him 100%. You got to deal with what you got, and they got to play the cards they're dealt. And I mean, the Ouija board is kind of moving towards a consensus, which is okay. Like the longer you go, the more certain you can be. But I still think it's up to interpretation, or up to us to find out. But yeah, so if it is a wayward piece of equipment, and it was then Poland, then it's not a NATO and Poland and Russia issue. It's a Poland and Russia and Ukraine issue, and obviously Poland has every right to get upset about the 90 missiles that got fired, and inevitably, if it was an air defense ordinance that did this, then yeah, it is a downstream consequence of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. That being said, I mean, obviously we're not even talking Article 4 or Article 5 at that point, unless they can make that argument. But they would have to make a very good argument that I wouldn't make. But that's what they get paid, or that's what their passion is. That's what they do. Maybe they can. But to try and I don't want to say misinterpret it, but even if Russia doesn't have the surveillance capabilities that we have, they don't. I'm sure they understand what happened, and even if they didn't, I'm guessing 2 weeks from now, Bellingcat's going to have an article with 3 Instagram posts and a TikTok all strung together that shows us clearly where it came from, who launched it, and his passport number. So yeah, we'll see.
Great, thanks a lot. So, thanks a lot, Finance. How are you? I haven't talked to you in a while. It seems like it's been a long evening.
Yeah, no, I look, I was clued into the Poland thing later on in the day, after I'd already talked to a friend in Ukraine in the basement. So when they're like, "Hey, have you heard the news?" and I thought the news was just how many missiles that Russia had shot at our friends in Ukraine. And no, it turns out that they also shot some missiles at our friends in Poland. So yeah, it's a pretty crazy day today. Definitely wish that this wasn't happening, because as much as I love being here with you all, Be a whole lot better to not be here with you all, because that would mean that Russia was no longer firing weapons at innocent people who have absolutely no need to be in the line of fire. That seems like a much better outcome for pretty much everybody. Yeah. So with that, I think Mr. Rfire has been waiting, and then we'll be back to Gunny and Craig. Mr. Rfire.
Okay, Finance. I will say something weird. It's first time I'm not agree with Gunny. Will not be a proportionate answer to what happens this evening, and I will explain why. Before a missile hit the ground in Poland, our export of energy from Romania to Moldova was cut off because there was overload of energy in the system, and Moldova energy company decided to cut off, and this disrupted half of Moldova, and our export of energy to Moldova and probably to Ukraine also was cut off. About the missile, I don't think does it matter if it's I can say an intersection of air defense S-300 or a Russian cruise missile who was crap like all Russian things and killed two Polish men. Why do I think the answer will be completely disproportionate? I don't say NATO will declare war to Russia. Just saying, probably this night we saw the last time when Russia will take any offensive measures in Ukraine. The missiles who are crossing the border outside Ukraine are for the fourth time. 2 times over the Ukraine, 2 times over the Poland. Second, these things, if it's not answered, will affect very, very hard President Biden. If you remember well, when he visited Poland, he said, "We will defend every inch of the NATO territory." At this moment, the Republicans, the more extreme right Republicans, will press very, very hard for strong measures, and President Biden will need to do this to cover his internal politics of the United States. It's not just about NATO, it's not just about Poland, it is about internal politics of the United States. I will add another layer of this topic. This idea, you can launch missiles and you think nothing happened because, you can hit some commercial ships in the Black Sea, you can cross the borders in Moldova, you can kill 2 people in Poland. Is not the action of great military, of confident military. It looks very, very, very bad in any aspects. And to deter this, you need to hit this bully on the face, not with your punch, but with a brick or even something stronger. If he's any rational actor in Kremlin at this moment, I will shoot bricks. Because, you can go to say on the Russian televisions, any crap you want. Yesterday they said they will nuke Poland and Romania. It's not first time. But after this incident, I think the attitude will be something like, this is just my speculations. I don't know if you will see a public declaration of this. But I think Belarus launching any missile from their territory, I don't speak Lukashenko launch the missiles, Russians do it, will be considered a threat to NATO. In the moment you launch some Iranian drones or cruise missiles from the territory of Belarus, will be considered you go offensive and you can make mistakes and attack Poland or Baltics. Same will apply with Black Sea. Probably now, because the diplomatic channels are open with Moscow, this message will be delivered. And let's not forget something about Poland. Poland, Baltics, Romania, they are not in an easy situation. Like, we can accept everything. Because, you know, when Ukrainians will start to freeze in their homes, every rational people from there will get this conclusion. We can go to Lviv. Lviv is totally overcrowded. Most of the cities in Ukraine lost power, water, and the plan to replenish and repair this is very long term. You can do it this very fast. So they will need to cross the border, and they will cross in 3 different countries: Poland, Republic of Moldova, and Romania. And take this conclusion: we are not rich countries. We are not Germany. We are not France. We have our economical problems. And tomorrow, when the NATO defense ministers or foreign ministers will convene, probably Germany will try to be prudent. Not French, not Italians. And I saw a declaration of President Biden today. He was in the right and left side, Mr. Sunak and Justin Trudeau. And when the journalist asked if President Biden can say what happened in Poland, he said very concise, no. So there is a plan. Probably there will be some pressure from the Eastern Bloc allies to be stern in attitude. Mr. Biden will have his heritage being vice president of President Obama, who drew a red line in Syria and that remain in the air. So he need to look better. He need to comply with the majority of Republicans in Congress.
Daniel,
please.
Can we land? Appreciate where you're going with this. Can we land the plane, though, sir? We have a number of hands.
I think it's landed. Okay, go.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Daniel. I just want to add a couple things here. Obviously, there has been some news, and I've heard some discussion about who has said what. I mean, so this incident occurred about 13 hours ago. It was still daylight at that time in Poland when this occurred, or getting close to dusk. EOD arrived later in the night. We have video of EOD arriving. So EOD was not there within an hour or so. It took them a little while to get there. But not shortly after then EOD arrived, then the announcement of all of the calls started. And from foreign ministries last night, there were a lot of calls. Jens Stoltenberg, Annalena Baerbock, Macron, obviously Zelensky, Blinken. The G7 and NATO countries have met on the side of the G20 conference and have released a statement. So there has been a lot of discussion over the night between various European and U.S. leaders, NATO leaders as well, all basically saying the same thing: wait for the investigation to come out. About an hour ago, Joe Biden had a press gaggle. He was asked by the press, first of all, basically his same statement: we support in the investigation. We will get to the bottom of this, and this only strengthens our resolve to see it to the end. He was asked whether the missile came from Russian territory. He said, quote, preliminary info shows that it was unlikely that it was fired from Russian territory. So we will see what comes out today, obviously the investigation, but I just want to put some of these things in timeline that there were a lot of calls last night, between a lot of one-to-one calls, some group meetings with most of the key players in Europe to get on the same page. So I just add that, and then let's go to Gunny. Thanks for waiting, guys.
No dramas, mate. Yeah, I mean, as Craig said, look, this was always going to happen. Always going to happen. Look at it from the Russian side. There is a veritable flood of kit coming across various borders that's killing Russian soldiers. And they have avoided, to my knowledge, going after, and let's assume that they're not completely stupid, they've avoided going after border logistical hubs, because all this kit's got to come across somehow, nominally by road, and they haven't really gone after these points. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out potentially where the equipment's coming across, and where those things come across, just the Ukrainian side of it, that's fair game as far as the Russians are concerned. I suspect they haven't gone after some of these things simply because there is a danger of what happened today occurring. It's pretty easy to determine whether a hit was deliberate. If I draw, and we will have a bearing line, if I draw a bearing line of a missile flight profile, I will probably be able to tell you where it came from. And unless it was following some kind of dogleg evasive course, if it was flying on a straight bearing and I look down that bearing and there is nothing of interest down that bearing line, I can probably say that they went after some grain silos in Poland. So just think about that first as a potentially logical step increase by the Russians in order to test NATO. To me, it sounds a little bit out there, not beyond the realms of possibility. They've used battlefield chemical weapons on the streets of my country. So, nothing's off the cards, but I would respectfully say seems a little bit off. We will know where this came from. I think that's why Biden, why the president, shouldn't use his second name, it's disrespectful, why the president came out with that statement, probably hedging his bets. I suspect he knows the full story already. Makes perfect sense. There's a lot of air defense assets up NATO side. The proportionate response, you've got to remember that whenever we take a step, such as what I said about an air defense zone, buffer zone, there are inherent risks in that. All right. So let's say I think 50 kilometers probably isn't enough for something going 600 kilometers an hour. I would say probably a 100 kilometer buffer zone. Now, to you and me and everyone listening, that is a reasonable step. If it's implemented using surface-to-air missiles only, no NATO combat air patrols over Ukraine, but a 100K buffer zone giving sufficient time to look at air tracks, ascertain if they are a potential threat to a NATO country, and carrying out multiple engagements, sounds very reasonable. Okay, I'm all over that. Anyone who thinks that I'm batting for the other side here, I'm not. That seems very reasonable to me. On the other side of the fence, NATO just became a combatant. They just became a combatant because you're killing Russian missiles. Therefore, you are a military combatant in the Russian-Ukrainian war. So, these are actions that will be very, very carefully weighed up, pros and cons, by NATO. So as Charles said, there are going to be a lot of meetings. There's going to be a lot of strokey bearding meetings going on. there's going to need to be a proportionate response that serves due warning to Russia, be it don't fire cruise missiles at targets near NATO, or don't fire cruise missiles that necessitate some kind of engagement by the Ukrainians that can lead to an accident with an S-300, while simultaneously not dialing up the threat matrix on either side, which might precipitate something a little bit bigger. Not over this. As I said before, there'll be a time and a place for NATO putting gloves on and putting a mouth guard in and saying, right, let's do this. If you're gonna F around, now you're gonna find out. I just don't think this is the time, and I think the response will probably be fairly proportionate. Thinking back on it, the air defense zone, it seems reasonable. As I said, I think diplomatically there are all kind of problems with it. Primarily, as I said, it could be viewed as NATO becoming a combatant, because an air defense buffer zone means that the Russians can't attack anything inside that buffer zone at all, i.e. Ukrainian targets are now under active NATO protection. Combatants. That's what it is. So you know, we're really going to have to wait and see. But yeah, I think Biden's statement was quite interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead, Finance. Sorry.
No, I'll let you run it for a sec.
Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot, Gunny. Yeah, I mean, I suspect that a lot of these initial calls and initial meetings have to do with setting communication, right? And getting everybody sort of on the same page about what the information is and what will be shared, what will not be shared, and so on. Yeah, so these meetings will continue, I believe. Let's go next to Craig.
So I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, all these individual national leaders, whether it be Poland, Estonia, the United States, Great Britain, this conglomerate or syndicate, if you will, of countries that have come together to support Ukraine, it's important to remember that as things sit right now, status quo, as long as it plays out the way that it has, which we have no reason to believe that it won't, we have Russia by the balls for the next 100 years, right? And that's an important goal to want to strive to, is keeping it contained for the better part of a century. Because if that is your overall objective, then these individual instances have to be taken as a part of cost and risk. I hate to say it like that, but you could have let this war end in 3 days by not shipping them a single thing. If your concern was that there might be some blowback on this side of the border, without that belief, then man, you went in eyes wide shut, right? And so I think it's important, again, I hate to sound redundant, that if we're in such a positive position, we have Russia exactly where we want it, demoralized on the battlefield, logistically constrained, asking Iran for things to blow up infrastructure. But you know what? I have bad news. Eventually, winter will end. It is not a year-long winter, right? Winter will end. The earth will get warm again, and Ukrainian tanks will be on the move. There's nothing that's going to stop that. And I hate to get bogged down in conversations about, no disrespect to anybody that's mentioned it, but things about, what kind of response are we going to have? What's going to be there? I'll tell you what the response is. A one-page, one-paragraph statement from a group of countries that says, we demand restitution, we demand accountability, and we want an apology. And that sounds strange, but that's exactly what the United States has done across the world. When we make a mistake and take innocent life, we investigate it. If we find that there's something there, and we have done many a time, paid money, restitution, admitted guilt for what we had done, and Russia shouldn't have any problem doing that. And the fact that it does, I think, even underlines the score even more, that while those two deaths, those two people that passed away are missed by their families, their nation obviously, I guess, is feeling it at this point, that those lives are not done away with in vain by missing again that overall arc of where we see this war going. Keep our emotions constrained, keep our ideas constrained to, you know what, we hear that, we feel that, but we're on a track right now and nothing's going to stop this train, so to speak, right? We just got to keep going through.
Thanks a lot, Kenny. Let's go to Dan and then Leonard. Dan?
My phone lost its mind. I apologize. So backing up one step on something that Craig said, he was making a reasonably good case that we had done a good job since 224, 225, the start of the actual major part of the war, and shipping about as much as could reasonably be shipped. But he's leaving out the fact that we wasted, depending on where you want to start counting it from, 30 years, 14 years, or 8 years, because Ukraine gave up 1,000 nuclear weapons in return for a guarantee that we've not done a great job of following up on. And then in 2008, Angela Merkel blocked them from joining NATO. And then in 2014, despite the aforementioned guarantee, we did squat when they took Crimea. So when you look at how time has been utilized, I would respectfully submit that you've got to look at all of it. And before we got it halfway in gear, we wasted a bunch of it. And the excuses for not getting it all the way in gear now are zero, starting with a couple of hundred ATACMS missiles. Just, I mean, like in the morning, and those are not a logistical burden to move. They've already got the HIMARS to shoot them out of. They should be on a train.
Can I just briefly respond to that, Charles?
Of course.
Yeah, please.
So number one, to your point about the agreement regarding Ukraine's sovereignty, I would argue that we're honoring that agreement as we speak right now. And I think it's disingenuous to say that we abandoned Ukraine. We certainly did not. Number two, in 2008, I don't believe the Ukrainian government at the time was asking for arms and munitions to repel a Russian invasion. Was it talking about NATO membership? Of course it was. But I don't think that there was a threat of an armed Russian invasion into Ukraine, given the somewhat friendly, not all the time friendly, to Russian policies, hence what we see in 2014, which I would then argue that not only did we not abandon Ukraine, we sent in the trainers, we sent in the people to help change it. This has been said 1,000 times by 1,000 people who've worn 1,000 uniforms, that you can give somebody the best kit in the world, but if they don't know how to use it and integrate it and train on it and coach it and utilize it to its maximum potential, that is an empty vessel. We taught them how to operate, and then when we gave them these mechanized things, everybody's looking around the world being like, well, how the heck did that happen? Well, it happened because what happened was that NATO got together and started sending in trainers, and started sending in advisors, and that has an impact to what we say. So I would just say for those three instances, I understand where you're coming from. I hear you. But to say that nothing has happened does not contextualize the entire relationship between the United States vis-a-vis NATO or the West to the nation of Ukraine. Zelensky and other administrations, I would just say this, have not called for American troops or had not called for, American this. They just asked for munitions and we're giving it there. I assure you, the equation for square footage does not change on a wagon wheel, right? On rolling stock. Unfortunately, we can't make it bigger. There's only so many times you can run a train down a track. I'm not talking about attack them. That's a conversation for another day. But just as a holistic approach, math does factor into this. And I will say just one thing. The fact that we do not have an operational seaport, this war, you're talking hundreds of, I can't even begin to describe to you the logistical bottleneck of not having an open seaport. It has caused absolute havoc.
Can I just?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Just one short note here. So I see several requests, or I had some requests, and you guys waited for a while. Right now, I have a small technical glitch that I can't add people up. So I appreciate your patience. I think Dr. Alex, Jens, I saw you. I'm going to cycle back up. Finance will take over for a bit so I can fix this problem. But yeah, Gunny maybe short. Excuse me, Daniel maybe short response, and then let's go to Leonard.
I'm just saying they gave up 1,000 nuclear weapons because we gave them a piece of paper. If they had 1,000 nuclear weapons, there wouldn't be one Russian soldier on their soil.
I think that they are firmly well aware of that, and one of the lessons of this war, whether we like it or not, is definitely going to be that people are not going to be taking simple agreements around nuclear weapons in the future, because who would after this? So I certainly think that what you're saying has been heard by the people who really matter in this case. And with that, let's move to the next hand, which I believe is Leonard, then Armand.
Thank you, Finance. In response to Dan's comments, I think, Dan, you are bang on the money. The reference you make is, of course, to the Budapest Memorandum of 1994, where Ukraine gave up all of their nuclear weapons. And it took literally 4 to almost 5 years to complete that entire process. That's how significant and technically difficult it was. But yes, they went through all of that. And if you fast forward to 2014, then Craig's comments in terms of the U.S. being very stalwart behind Ukraine, that really doesn't bear the light of day. That simply doesn't wash, because 2014 essentially was the end result of literally not standing full foursquare behind the Budapest Memorandum, and Russia was allowed to take Crimea, after which they directly proceeded to launch their incursion into the Donbass, so Luhansk and Donetsk, and then of course the rest is history. But also to reference one of Gunny's points, that and Gunny, I agree significantly with what you're saying, and I appreciate your reticence in terms of where this ends up. But by the same token, you said that the minute you impose a no-fly zone or a sanitized corridor, if you will, then at that point, you're automatically, or the U.S. is automatically, the West is automatically NATO at war with Russia. Well, the fact of the matter is that based upon today, with 2 dead Poles and a rocket attack into Poland, that Poland is at war, arguably, with Russia today. And what they do with that, I mean, there's intensive discussions right now. And the other thing that should be referenced is the status, or the relative importance of Poland in the final decision. And keeping in mind that Craig's reference was to the conglomerate, or the collaboration of the Western allies, Canada, US, Britain, France, et cetera, but short circuit that to Poland, really, because Poland is in the driver's seat in terms of where this goes. And you have to keep in mind where the Poles see this in terms of their history. The Poles suffered the Katyn Forest massacre at the hands of the Russians, a diabolical, absolutely nefarious assault that wiped out their entire officer corps in the Polish army, whatever was surviving, together with their entire intelligentsia. 10,000 Poles, officers, met their end, essentially wiping out the full brain behind any of the Polish military for generations. So that, and then also keeping in mind the references with Russia in our current times. We've had the MH Flight 17 knocked down by Russia over the Donbass, or possibly even into Russia itself, wherever the debris fell. But there was 300 Dutchmen killed in that little missile attack on a civilian airliner. And then previous to that, an item that has very seldom been mentioned was the in the Reagan administration, the Korean Airlines flight that was shot down by Russia with 100 plus Americans on board. And that, of course, in that incident, Russia issued an apology immediately. And the essentially what the point of what Craig's final comment in terms of an apology being forthcoming, yeah, that's an excellent point. In fact, if Russia was truly being not disingenuous about this, they would acknowledge their error and make some form of an apology forthwith. But nobody expects them to do that. And in light of the full kind of bird's eye view of history we just did, the Poles have some serious thinking to do. Because yes, Russia's actions have put them effectively at war with Russia today. And where do they go from that? Do they just back down again, as has been done for time and time again over the eons? Well, I guess we'll see what the Poles decide here. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. Let's go to Jens, because I know he was waiting a long time before.
Oh, no, go to Armand.
Okay, Armand, then Alex.
Hello, everybody. So I love listening to this report. I do it almost every day. And so I'm going to be very quick about my remarks. So I've been thinking about the rationale behind what happened today. And to me, Biden already knows where the exact trajectory of where this came from, the platform from which it was launched, and the vector from where it came. So I think that right now they are actually considering what they're going to do, because it doesn't take a PhD from War College, with all due respect, to know that Crimea is going to fall. It's just materially impossible for the Russians to sustain it. And I wholeheartedly agree with Craig. I really do believe that with most of his assessment. And so coming back again to the rationale behind this small sort of significant attack on the Poles, which they are not going to back down, then I came to my senses, and I fell for the common mistake that of presuming rationality. So to wrap it up, I am going to be standing by to see what Russia does next in relation to what NATO responds, because what I'm feeling right now is a Putin that is cornered, that a week ago that he's finished with what happened here, and he's going to try to escalate to de-escalate, and he's going to try to test the resolve of NATO and the West. And I think this is the first step.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Armand. I think, yeah, I agree with with the whole entire discussion. This is a fascinating discussion for me to listen to. I do believe that they have a lot of facts, and obviously they're not. We don't need to know that right now, and I think they are in the decision-making process. Obviously, no matter how unified you are as a group, there's a lot of stakeholders to get aligned, not only to the decision but also to the message. And let's not forget Poland's role in this. Let's go to Alex. Alex, thanks for waiting. I saw you were requesting for a while. I couldn't bring you up. Now you're up.
Thank you, Charles, and no worries. I think the comments by Leonard sort of resonate with my thinking, and really how I learned about this. I was literally reading an article about reading an article in the New York Times questioning the resolve of the Polish people and their patience, because they are, bearing probably the greatest brunt in terms of the humanitarian response. The concern I have is not so much of whether Russia is trying to probe NATO. The military and geopolitical comments have been spot on and very cogent. I don't think that's what Russia was doing. And whether they intended it to land in Poland or whether it accidentally landed in Poland, my concern is, and I wasn't aware that and I don't know that it's true, but certainly what was presented in the news article led me to believe, well, is the resolve of the Polish people actually wavering? And if this was intentional, maybe it wasn't so much an attack on NATO, but an attack on the Polish psyche, as Leonard suggested. My mother was Polish, and in her final days, I had 2 Polish ponies taking care of her, and I used to talk to them. And this was like about 10 years ago. And they all they could talk about is what a scumbag Putin was, and how they feared him. So I guess I don't know if there's someone that can comment on where the meter is in terms of the resolve of the Polish people at this point, and whether maybe it was shot out of the sky and randomly landed on a farm, killing the 2 farmers, perhaps, or maybe it was intentional. Let's send a missile and have it drop just across the border and see what happens. See if we could possibly disrupt the resolve of the Polish people. So if anybody
Thanks.
has any comments along those lines, that I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alex. That's the first I've heard about any cracks in Polish resolve. I can speak from Germany. I don't know if Daniel knows more about Romania. I think Craig has a response to this, so I'll go to Craig next and then Jens. But first, shortly about Germany, the refugees that we have in Germany, there's no issue. They were welcomed very easily. I will say that we had the experience in 2015 with a larger number of refugees. A lot of that had to do with very poor refugee resettlement and integration programs. That is now much more robust. And the number of Ukrainians that arrived in Germany was relatively small. I think only a few 100,000. But I can say, for example, even in my youth football team, I have a Ukrainian playing, and the family is completely integrated as they are around Germany. Obviously, they view it as a temporary step. They're not there to stay forever. They don't want to stay forever. But regarding Polish and Romania, I'd have to refer to others. But Craig, go ahead with your response.
Yeah, no, I would just say this. If nothing changes, there's no response, there's no nothing. Right? The Polish president says whatever he says, the United States president says whatever he says, and we just go back to our business. We then assume that this will then be repeated, right? But ask yourself, what's the end result? Russia being defeated, right? That's the end result. So what stops that from happening? What stops Ukraine from being pushed out, of Russia being pushed out of Ukraine? An alliance that's fractured along one that wants violence and another that doesn't. And it just gets to be at that level. So what you do is you ask yourself in your decision-making tree, well, if we do nothing, what happens? Well, same thing that's happened yesterday. Russians are losing the war. Well, then what do we want for what just happened? Well, we want Russia to be defeated. Well, that's what's going to happen anyway. Well, okay, well, there you go, right? So it's important just to kind of keep that long-term view, right? Justice is, but what I always get that phrase mixed up, right? The arc of justice is long, but bends towards truth, right? Or something along those lines. I forget how that usually goes. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Craig. Okay, Jens.
Yeah. As I see it, like 2 Polish citizens were killed as a direct result of Russia's terror bombing of Ukraine, whether it was a stray anti-air missile or if it was a Russian missile. It's a result of the terror bombings. And I think right now Poland and the Baltics are looking to NATO to see if NATO will support its eastern flank. I think NATO has proven itself to be very much irrelevant, and I think we need to prove to the NATO members, especially those we rely on as the front towards Russia, to demonstrate to them that they matter. Right now, 2 Polish citizens were killed, and Poland are also looking at Ukraine, where its infrastructure and their cities are getting attacked, and they are wondering what will they get? Will they receive more Ukrainian refugees? I think the best thing we could do, other than reassure those bordering NATO countries, is to reassure them that they are in fact valuable members, but also that we need to level up Ukraine. I think it's very important. I know we're investigating genocide. I know we are investigating the Nord Stream, and I know we're investigating this, and it's great that we are investigating this rigorously. But I think the Baltics and Poland need more than a diplomatic bad Yelp review to Russia. I think we really need to send a signal that NATO is relevant. I'm not suggesting that we escalate, but I really think it's important that NATO decides whether we want to signal strength or weakness to the frontier countries.
Thanks, Jens. I don't know if I can't buy the line that NATO is irrelevant. I think that sentence feels about 4 years old. I think it's one of the themes of this Russian invasion, how relevant NATO is and how more relevant it has become. And to talk about Poland specifically, I mean, let's not forget that the United States Army did move the 5th Corps headquarters, or at least the forward headquarters, to Poland I mean, this is a command and control element, but these things are built. This sends not only a signal, but provides key command and control capabilities to NATO forces. There is an armored brigade of US soldiers in Poland. There is an airborne brigade of US soldiers in Romania. So I think this is not nothing, what the United States has done. These are force sizes that haven't been in Europe since 1990, basically. Maybe 2001, before they moved the 1st Armored Division back to the United States. But these are